evening. Today is Thursday, September 22nd, and welcome to the 8:30 show. I'm KJ, and every Thursday night you'll find me here at 8:30 p.m. on YouTube at Metro Conservative Media. Please hit the subscribe button and give me a thumbs up. At the same time, I'm also live on Facebook at the Metro Conservative Media Facebook page. Please like our page and join the conversation by commenting on this video. We will respond to your comments during the show. This is a show where I chat with various individuals about their conservative journey. Tonight, joining me is my guest is Nicholas Patrick. Nicholas is owner and founder of Embrace CBD Wellness Center and co-founder of Syndicated Broadcast Solutions. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Thanks, KJ. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. Excited for this.
Yes, so am I. Absolutely. So, before we get into the bulk of the show, I will generally do a fun question and answer segment so the audience can get to know you a little bit better in a fun, cool way.
Okay.
So it's basically a rapid fire round. I'll ask the question and you just answer with the first thought that comes to your mind.
Sounds good.
All right. Let's see here. So, what are you most known for amongst your friends?
Talking.
Okay. Okay. All right. Public school system or homeschooling, if you had to choose?
Homeschool.
All right. What quality do you value most in your friends?
Authenticity.
Okay. Big party or small gathering?
Small gathering.
Which rapper, if you have to choose one of these, is the better rapper in your opinion? Eminem or MGK?
Look, those are my two favorite secular rappers, man. Oh my goodness. Eminem is the better rapper. MGK is more enjoyable for me to listen to. In fact, I was just at his concert in Cleveland. He's a huge fan. Huge fan of MGK.
Okay.
But Eminem is the better rapper. That's a crazy question. Okay.
I know.
I'm gonna get a lot of hate for that. Nobody likes MGK. I like him. I like the punk rock thing he's doing. I like all of that.
Yeah, he's interesting. I will say that he's definitely interesting. I love Eminem though. I'm a big Eminem fan.
I mean, lyrically speaking, he can't.
Yeah, lyrically.
Yes.
Last one: be painfully aware or blissfully ignorant.
Painfully aware.
Okay. All right. So that was kind of just a fun, random question and answer. I knew that Eminem MGK was.
I like it. You know, it's funny because I be going to getting into real arguments with people defending Machine Gun Kelly as an artist. People just, people look at the pink stuff he's doing and all this, weird hairstyles and all. But the guy is very talented and he's been doing this stuff for a long time. I've been a fan of his since before anybody knew who he was. So yeah. But I love him.
He's been out there for a while, for a very long time. I think he's just starting to get a lot more notice because he's dating Megan Fox.
Well, yeah, and now he's doing, he's really focusing on the rock music, but
right.
He's been doing that his whole career. But anyway, I'll talk MGK all day, but I don't think that's what we want to talk about.
No, that's fine. All right. Well, so what I would like to get into right now is your conservative journey. And you have a very interesting story. So can you talk about you were not always conservative, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And so what was the change for you? When did you change and what caused you to change to a conservative perspective?
It's not like it wasn't like I like you and I talked earlier today about your story. Your story is a little bit different than mine. I didn't exactly turn on a dime.
Okay.
I think I slowly and gradually became more and more conservative in different ways as different things became, as I went through different experiences and I listened to different people and I started to take the blinders off a bit. It was a slow and gradual process to get into where I am today. I grew up in I'm an immigrant. I was born in Jerusalem. I moved to the States when I was a baby. My father and mother are both immigrants. My mother is from India. My father is from Czechoslovakia, but he also spent many years in Israel. He fought in the Israeli military. He worked really, really hard to get us to this country. He always believed in the American dream. He lived all over the world. He speaks multiple different languages, and he brought me here as a baby. And as I grew up, I was, average teenage kid. My parents split when I was like 15. I started to get into trouble. I started to go, I was selling drugs. I dropped out of high school when I was 16 years old, and I started to get into a lot of trouble. In and out of jail, criminal record, the whole nine as a juvenile. And then my father would always tell me, that there were people that would kill to live here, to take advantage of the opportunities that this country has to offer. And he would always say those types of things to me. But me having been brought here as a baby, I didn't have the same frame of reference that my father did, having lived in all these different countries. Like my father literally swam from Czechoslovakia to Austria to escape the invasion of the Soviets when they invaded Prague. And he would tell me these stories of living on a beach and working in the mines and all of these different things, and having to change his last name to get away from the communists. And so my father's worldview, I didn't share that because I didn't have anything other than I grew up in New Jersey. All I knew was Jersey.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't look at it the same way. But as I got older, when I was 21, my son was born, and I decided to move out of New Jersey, move down to Maryland, change my life, get a regular job, stop selling drugs, and try to be a role model and a person that my son could eventually be proud of. And through that process, the whole time when I was also, you mentioned that you talked about Eminem, you talked about MGK. I'm a huge hip hop fan. I'm also a hip hop artist. I do more Christian conservative hip hop now, but back in those days, I was rapping about what I was living, and I was very liberal at that time. Guys like Obama were these were people that you looked up to, that you idolized, right? Because they were quote unquote, standing up for the little guy, the guys down at the bottom, which is, for some reason I had identified with that, that sort of victim mentality, that down bottom, I'm from the bottom, started from the bottom, and almost the pride that comes along with being at the bottom, which is a really weird thing to be proud of. But it was a sort of a mindset for me at that time. And as I got older and I started to, work a regular job, and then seeing taxes getting taken out of my paycheck, and, learning what it was like to really be an adult and a grown up, and having to deal with, raising a son and trying to make it in the world, you start paying attention to things you didn't pay attention to before, like taxes, like job opportunities and things of that nature. So I got involved when I was 25 in a business, in the multi-level marketing industry. For those of you who don't know, it's a home-based business where you can make money through the building of a team, recruiting people, all of that kind of thing. Everyone's been introduced to some form of a multi-level marketing business.
You look like a sharp individual.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. I got into that industry when I was 25, and I took it very seriously because for me, having dropped out of high school, having never gone to college, no formal education, no credentials, I had no choice but to do this or go back to my old ways, selling drugs, doing something. So I built this business, took it very, very seriously, and through that, I met a lot of wealthy people. And then I got influenced by a lot of wealthy people and what it takes to generate wealth, the type of mindset you have to have, this idea of personal responsibility, this idea of really getting to, for me, it was seeing guys, like I had a mentor, I had two mentors, both African-American guys, both of them from the inner city, both of them who had made millions of dollars in this industry. And these were guys that were, quote unquote, from the bottom. And these guys were doing really, really big things. And they were doing it in legitimate business. They were, they weren't in the street selling drugs. They were building a business. And it was a huge inspiration to me. And it kind of made me look at my previous life and the excuses that I used to make and realize like that was kind of immature and a silly way of thinking. And I think I've noticed that with a lot of people, that kind of the older you get, the more life experience you have, the more conservative you wind up becoming, like little by little by little, or at least in my experience and in some of my friends as well. So I started seeing these guys, and I got inspired, and I realized what the American dream was all about. The fact is, if you're willing to put in the work, if you're willing to develop certain skills, and you're willing to put one foot in front of the other and not blame people for what you don't have, and be willing to do the things that most people are unwilling to do, you can eventually have the things that most people don't have. And it had nothing to do with my background, my skin color, my my gender, my sexual orientation, none of that stuff. It just had purely to do with my work ethic.
Let me ask you something on that, because
Sure.
it's something we were talking about actually offline yesterday after our other show, Pop and Politics. We were talking about the American dream. What do you believe it's different for everyone, or is the American dream just about making money, or does it consist of more than that? And let me give you like a context, because we were talking about, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with the rapper Glorilla, and she has a song out right now that's kind of glorifying Planned Parenthood and abortions and things like that. And so we were talking about, I'm personally against that in the song. But one of my other co-hosts was saying, well, she's living the American dream. She's come from nothing and now she's got this song out, she's making money, and this is her American dream. Do you agree with that concept?
And in principle, yes.
Mm-hmm.
In practice, no. Right? Like, yes, I believe she's living the American dream. I saw this. I was actually in DC last week, and there's this statue there. It's called the Beck's Eagle, and there's something written there that said, "Freedom is the right to one soul, the right to each person to approach God in his own way and by his own means. It's a man's right to possess his mind and conscience for himself. To those who put their trust in freedom, the state can have no sovereignty over the mind or soul. Must be the servant of man's reason, not the waster." So when I read that, I'm like, I don't like Planned Parenthood. I don't like abortion. I'm in my house, we will serve the Lord. In my house, we will not have abortions, and I don't believe that abortion should be legal. Personally, I am unapologetically pro-life, but for somebody to go on and make a video and rap and do her thing, and that's her and who she is, and she's successful and she's happy, and then I think that is her version of the American dream. But I think that it's sad.
Right.
In my opinion, and again, I'm often wrong about other, and I'm no expert on what is the American dream, but I believe it is for you to be able to feel successful, for you to be able to put in work and gain a result that makes you feel fulfilled.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because in a lot of places, in other countries, people don't have the option to do what they want.
Mm-hmm.
Nonetheless, what makes them feel fulfilled, nonetheless, never mind actually succeeding in it. Right. So, no, I don't know what is it? Glorilla?
Glorilla, yeah.
Glorilla, never heard of her.
Fairly new.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine the song sucks, the video sucks, and
Yeah.
it's all garbage. But at the end of the day, if people are succeeding, if people are having a sense of purpose and fulfillment, whether I agree with them or I don't agree with them, that's kind of what America allows for.
Right.
I think the American dream and the culture is at a point of degradation that's absolutely disgusting and sad and sickening. And the culture is in a place where it's going to be very difficult to come back from this. Sometimes I wonder how we ask God not to judge our nation.
Mm-hmm.
How do we ask him to show mercy on our nation when there's people like that out there who are thriving and who are succeeding, with their scriptures that talk about what's those people's reward will be in the next life, right? So the American dream to me is my father. My father worked hard to get here. He by no means was wealthy, but he had a job. He was a limo driver, but he went from living in a place where there was no freedom, where people were popping out of tanks and shooting people in the street for no reason, because the government had power to do wild stuff. And so he wanted to live in this country, and he did. And he got a job as a limo driver. He worked until he retired, and now he's in retirement. He rides his bike around, and he's living out his life. And that's the American dream, is being able to live free.
And so you were talking about, before we got off to the American dream, you were talking about how you became conservative, and it sounds like through your faith. When did you find your faith in all of this?
In 2012, I was living a very debaucherous lifestyle, even as a father. Even when I moved here and I got a regular job, I spent a lot of time drinking. I was pursuing the rapper lifestyle. So I was in the bars a lot. I was in the clubs. I was selling mixtapes. I was hustling. I was out there trying to make it happen. And with that comes a lot of drinking, a lot of womanizing, a lot of, just debauchery. And in August of 2012, I realized that there was something wrong with my body. I noticed that there was something off, and I went and got myself checked, and I had developed testicular cancer, and I had caught it, and I had to go through some surgeries, and then it had spread to lymph nodes in my abdomen, and then I was forced to go through chemotherapy, and that was brutal. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, but it was during that time when God whispers, and you don't listen, and then he knocks a little louder, and you don't listen, and then he'll drop a wall on you to get your attention if he has to. Not to say God gave me cancer, but he can use it. So I got sick, and I was in the hospital, 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, getting chemo for like almost 7 months. And during that time, there's only so much daytime TV, only so much Maury show that you can watch while you're in the hospital for all those hours, and the power of a praying mother. My mother would pray. My outlook was very bleak. I was having conversations about my mother, like what to do with my son when I die, how to just really gruesome and morbid thoughts and a very dark outlook. And my mother would pray, and she would pray, and she would pray. And then one day, I don't know where she got the boldness from, but she said, "Hey, why don't you just read the Bible instead of sitting here and watching this nonsense on TV?" And so I downloaded the Bible app on my phone out of boredom, literally out of sheer
Any interest before this at all in the Bible? Okay.
No, none at all. I mean, in fact, I was an atheist, and I would make fun of Christians, and no, not at all. No. I would talk to you about why dinosaurs ain't in the Bible and all some more stuff. There's no way that the earth was made in 7 days. It was just a billion years old and all this other stuff. So anyways, I started reading. It was Psalms 13. It was a Psalm of David. David is angry with God. He's being chased down by Saul, who wants to murder him. And he's screaming at God, "How long will you hide your face from me?" And it was kind of during that time I identified with that. It's like, man, okay. At the end of the verse, he says, "But I will sing your praises, for you dealt with me bountifully." And I was like, oh, okay, well, started to change my perspective on things a little bit. So I kept reading. Next day, it was Book of Romans. And I'm like, man, this is interesting stuff. I had to go back and do some context to find out who wrote this. I started investigating this guy named Paul, and I fell in love with that guy, with his story and who he was. And I couldn't stop reading it. And I just kept reading, and I kept reading, and I kept reading, and I kept reading. And then I fell in love with Jesus Christ. And I gave my life to Christ in February of 2013. And from that point, the entire trajectory of my life changed. And then I started to become conscious of my sin, conscious of the way that I was living, and how that was a slight against God, and what God had done for me by sending his son to die on the cross, and what that must be like. As a father, if you can imagine, or as a mother, even if you can imagine having to watch your only child suffer for somebody who doesn't deserve it. That's love that you can never fathom. It's just a love that human beings can never show to one another. It's just love that's unexplainable. And when that love hits you, it's like you get hit by a car. And if you get hit by a car, you should look different. And when you get hit by the presence of the Almighty and living God, you should look different. And I began to look different. I began to see things different. I began to move different. I began to become conscious of things that were wrong that I was doing, and the people in my circle, and started to audit my relationships, and were they serving me? Were they helping me to live a life that was honorable before God?
What was the reaction from your friends and people who been with you, hanging with you?
Some came with me, and some we don't have much in common anymore. Most we don't have much in common anymore. And truth is, I didn't feel too bad about it. I became a member of the church. It was around that time when I got introduced to my multi-level marketing business, and things started to go really well there. I was making new friends, people that were Christians, people that were positive, people that could feed my faith, people that were pushing me in the right direction. And so it was the culmination of all of that got me to look at the world and things a whole lot differently. And I wasn't much of a political person at the time, but then to me, if you have deeply held spiritual beliefs, they should impact every area of your life. If they're authentic, if they're real, if they're legitimate, then that should be something that affects the way that you move, the way that you interact with people, the decisions that you make, the people you place around you, and the way that you vote, right? So for me, I started to look more and realize that, my father was right about a lot of things. My mother was right about a lot of things, and I had things all wrong. And, it's not to say, I do kind of believe it's very difficult to be a real Christian and vote Democrat. I truly believe that, especially now, today. Today's Democratic Party is, I don't know how you can be a Christian and vote for that stuff. But
is there one or two issues you feel strongly that just totally stop you from voting Democrat?
Easy. Abortion and LGBT. Period.
Okay.
Period. But number one, beyond a shadow of a doubt, is God created man and woman. It's my belief. He created them male. He created them female. There's this idea of teaching children that they can change their gender. This idea of teaching children that here's what I know. In the book of Ephesians, God has a very clear plan for marriage, for family, and if the devil ever wanted to completely destroy a society, he would do it by destroying the family. Yeah. And there's so many ways that the family is under attack. And one of those is the feminist movement, the I don't need no man movement. Then you have this idea of the LGBT movement, where you have these kids who are lost, they're awkward, they're socially awkward, they don't have a whole lot of friends. You're living in this social media age where everything is about likes and comments and these hits of dopamine that you get from the interaction that you'll have on your social media posts. And there's kids that are lacking that validation, and they're looking for somewhere to fit in. And now all of a sudden they're being drawn to this movement that tells them, well, maybe you're just transgendered, or maybe you're gender neutral or gender fluid, or maybe you're this or that or the third thing, because America, and especially our youth, are suffering from a horrible, horrible crisis of identity. They don't know who they are. They don't know who they belong to. They don't know who designed them. They don't know where they're going. They don't know their purpose.
Right, and purpose, yeah.
And so I am a firm believer that we are meant as the church to stand in the gap, and not to point our fingers in judgment, but to speak truth in love.
Right.
Real love calls people out of those types of lifestyles. Yeah. How much do you have to hate somebody to know that they're living a lifestyle that'll help them to spend an eternity in hell and not tell them about it?
Yeah, I totally agree there. Totally agree. And yet we have, and I can honestly say the church, when you talk about the church, because there are very few that step out and preach and speak against this. They have taken it and run with it. They're either silent on these issues, or they agree with these issues and they welcome these issues.
Listen, that makes my blood boil. I went to a fundraiser event in Annapolis about 2 months ago, and there's the Episcopal Church right there. It was in June, so however long June was. The Episcopal Church right in Church Circle in Annapolis during Pride Month.
Oh, wait, I know where it is. Mm-hmm.
Did you see it?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Right?
They had the Love Thy Neighbor and the rainbow.
Right.
Outside of their church. Now, granted, love thy neighbor. I'm with you 100%. But what does love look like? Love's not always kind. Love sometimes is tough. My father used to have to beat the brakes off me, not because he hated me, but because he loved me. and he didn't like the direction that I was going in. So there's,
When you look at the Bible, and most times when God talks about love, the way to show love is obedience.
period,
Following his commandments and following the word of God is how we
period,
show love.
period.
That is the highest form of love, especially for Christians. Uh, but now everything has been twisted and turned around. The Bible talks about this. This is why I don't understand why the church isn't up raising red flags and more, because we know it stays this in the Bible. This is what is going to happen.
Well, I have a very unpopular opinion about that. It's even unpopular amongst conservatives, but I don't like that the American church has 501c3 status.
Oh, Shelley feels the same way on our pop and politics.
I don't like it at all. I think because the churches are designated as 501c3, they can't speak up because they're going to lose their tax exempt status. They can't make political contributions. They can't back certain politicians who can affect the culture war. They can't do it. They're silenced and they're muzzled. And then the church becomes a business. So when the church is a business, you're more concerned with how to keep somebody's ass in a seat than you are with that person's eternal destination.
Right.
And that's a problem. If you're more concerned with your membership and keeping people in your church that you're afraid to call out iniquity because you know it's unpopular, you're afraid to call people to repentance and correction because it's unpopular, and you know that your church will most likely be small, but the path is narrow that leads to eternal life, and there are few who find it, but broad is the gate that leads to destruction, and there are many who find it. And so, if the church isn't on the narrow path, we have a real problem.
We do. We certainly do. We have a huge problem right now, and that's why it's imperative for people like you, like me, Metro Conservative Media, to speak up, even if it does cause issues. Speak up, especially for the children. Our children are under attack. I was just reading today, the largest teachers union in the country, national, I think NEA, has just put out in Ohio. It's starting in Ohio right now. They put out this guideline on how to talk to children. Now, this is K through 12 about LGBT sex. They're talking about fisting and cuffing and rimming and all this type of stuff. They're talking
Get
about
out of here.
teaching children. And this is what I don't understand. When you talk about relationships and sexual intercourse in an educational environment, I always thought it was because of procreation. Now they're teaching kids kink. They're teaching kids all this extra stuff. And you have institutions, educational institutions, co-signing it and going, okay, this is right.
And KJ, this can't just be something that only pisses off conservatives. There's no way we live in a society where the majority thinks that that's okay. But the problem is that we don't make those things our main issues. Like that should be the issue. If that's the issue, and we appeal to the mothers and the fathers out here, and we have these types of conversations at a national level, and we blow these issues up, there's no way people wouldn't show up in droves for these for these freaking school board meetings.
People don't believe it. When I talk to moms and parents about this, who are not political, just regular parents, they don't know and they don't believe that this is going on. This is it here. The teachers union promotes a how-to guide, anal sex, bondage, fisting, all this stuff, the sadomasochism. This is what they're pushing in schools. And when you tell people about it that are not, they're not Fox News, not watching the news, just regular parents, they don't believe it until it really comes into the mainstream.
Oh my goodness. Oh, yeah. That's disgusting.
Yeah.
You know what? Rimming?
Yeah. Yeah.
Listen. Okay, all right. So it's freaking infuriating,
Yeah.
right? That is infuriating on so many levels. Forget about my spiritual views for a second. Let's just say I am the average American. I don't know nothing about God. I don't know nothing about Jesus. I'm just a regular old dude. I'm working a regular old job. I got kids. I don't care who you are. You that is not anything that any rational thinking human being would want their child to learn in school.
The only thing I can think of is, let's say you do have a child that identifies as gay. And I think the argument is they feel like these children should have someone, they have a romantic relationships. They should know what to do, I guess. I don't know, but it's.
Look, man, let me keep it funky with you. I figured it out on my own. They didn't teach me how to have sex in school. You know, as a normal heterosexual married man, I figured it out on my own.
Right.
Look, if the gay kids want to, they gonna figure it out too.
Let their parents tell them.
The parent,
I mean, I'm just saying, I don't agree. I don't agree with it. But if this is something that they feel children or teenagers need to know, let their parents tell them. It should not be something that is structured in a school setting.
Not at all.
Continue to push it.
That's my issue, right?
Yeah.
Like if you ask me what are the most important issues to you in the culture war, I would say it's stuff like that. It's stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Never mind, all the CRT stuff, you hate your country stuff, and the twisting of history, and all these. That's all bad. That's all bad. That's all bad for our society. There's no question about it. But I don't think there's anything more destructive than what we're seeing happening to the children in schools, and they have become indoctrination stations. My son is 16 years old. He has an algebra teacher. He's in the 10th grade. The algebra teacher has a transgendered daughter. So I'm guessing she has a son who's a transgendered daughter or whatever, right? Because of her personal, situation in her family, she's got a daughter like this. Everything in her classroom is freaking LGBT'd out. Everything, the whole classroom, rainbow flags, and I mean, there's like 80 different gay flags now. It's not just the one, and it's like there's 80 of them. She got all 80 of them all over the classroom, and then she asks the kids to fill out a form in the beginning of the school year with their preferred pronouns.
Oh.
But my
people need to wake up. And on that note, I want to play this clip here. Sure. And we'll talk about it afterwards.
You lacking the action to stand for the truth. They killing our babies in buildings and calling it health. They stealing and call it the redistribution of wealth. Got women subjected to standards that's pictured in porn. And men can't be men because the gender rules being reformed. So be informed, don't be deceived. Christ intercedes. What you receive will be achieved by your belief. Yes, Jesus saves. Is he not good enough to be obeyed? See, we depraved, so we decay because of our wicked ways.
I know who wrote that.
That is you rapping. Now you rap for Christ. You are Christian. So can you talk about that transition?
Oh yeah, sure. Nobody likes it. Nobody likes it. It's interesting. I actually began to take my music a little bit more seriously in terms of like production quality and video quality, and actually paying and investing money into my music when I made this transition. It's funny because I took some years off of the music stuff when I was going through all this transitional stuff and this life change, this drastic transformation. I wasn't doing music. I didn't have anything really to draw from, because at that time I was waiting tables, or I was building this business. There wasn't a whole lot of experience to draw from until things started getting so out of control. when it became undeniable that it's like, okay, listen, if you have a gift, it's time to use it. It's the same thing that, like, for example, when I was doing my multi-level marketing stuff, and I was getting towards the top of the company, and I was given the opportunity to speak on these very big stages on a weekly basis in front of hundreds of people. I felt that, okay, I can use this to make money, but I can also use this as an opportunity to preach the gospel, and so that's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes some people would love it. Sometimes the people who were running the events were saying, "Hey, man, lay off of that. This is a business event." But I used it. I used that platform, and that's why I love Metro Conservative Media. I say later on in that same song, or no, in another song, we can't stoop to their level because the answer is never violence, but it's time for us to speak out because the answer is never silence.
Mm-hmm.
We can't be quiet anymore.
No.
We can't be quiet. If we continue to be passive, we are going to lose the culture war. And look, I don't want to sound too conspiratorial, right? But I have been watching for the last at least 3 years the Facebook and website of the Communist Party USA. And I've been watching the things that they post. And they directly correlate to the things that we're seeing happening in the culture war. Mm-hmm. If you cannot convince normal, hardworking people like me and you to live in a communistic society, you're not going to be able to. You're not going to be able to convince KJ to go work a job and take all of your money and have it be distributed by the government to whoever they want. You're not going to have somebody like me who owns multiple businesses let the government come in, take over my businesses, and determine what I do with my profits. You're never going to convince us to do that. Right. What you can do is you can permeate the culture. You can permeate the culture over decades. You can get people, young people specifically, to hate the country that they live in, to destroy and assault heteronormative values, to destroy and assault any sort of patriotism and love of country, love of your countrymen by pitting people against each other. And slowly but surely, you'll get to a place where we need to tear down the whole system and start again. And that's where the communists will win. And whether you believe it or you don't believe it, or people think that I'm a conspiracy theorist, this is the destabilization phase of the communist infiltration and takeover of the United States. And it's being done through the culture. The culture is being used as a weapon, and a lot of people don't see it. They're blind to it. All they can see is, some people that are angry about it, but they don't see what's beneath the surface. Why are people endorsing this? You have and the ridiculous what's the word? It's so disingenuous when you have these people like Joe Biden, for example. He's on record a couple of years ago talking about how he's against gay marriage, talking about how abortion should be legal but rare, right? To now all of a sudden he's this huge advocate for all of this stuff. It's all so disingenuous, and you have to wonder, what is the end game? What is the goal?
It's disingenuous. It's hypocrisy. Look at what we see in the news this week about the border crisis. Mm-hmm. And how you have these governors, DeSantis and the governor in Texas, shipping these people to places like Martha's Vineyard. They don't want them there. But you had liberals and Democrats shouting, "Oh, open borders! Oh, let them in!" when it had anything to do with their very nice gated communities.
They were gone in 48 hours.
Right.
44.
50 or 51 immigrants, illegal immigrants. They got them out of there. But you have thousands of them rushing these border towns, hurting their social structure, increasing crime and all types of things. Public school education system is being overrun, and they don't bat an eye. They don't. It's pure hypocrisy. Well, let me ask you this, because you talked about influencing the culture and waking people up, and I love having people like you on the show and talking to people, because you have such a interesting and colored past. Especially for conservatives, because most people believe that conservatives, are rich, are straight-laced, very faith-based people, and don't have a past like you do.
Right.
So how do you bridge the gap? How do we talk to the culture, people who are used to be like you? How do we open their eyes and help them to realize what is going on?
Like, you have to look at some of the most successful people in the world, like some of the most successful, let's say, people with a history like mine, your Jay-Z's of the world, your Lil Waynes of the world, right? They can only have gotten to where they got because we had a system and a culture and a capitalistic society that allowed for them to get to where they're at.
Right.
People don't realize the blessing that they have. They just don't see it. And I think part of it is just getting people to realize, like, yo, you can't be you the way you're you. I mean, look, put it like this. The craziest thing that I ever saw, I saw a meme on Facebook that said, and it was a bunch of gay people with a sign up that said "Queers for Palestine." I was like, you got to be freaking kidding me, yo. They're queer. They just don't know that in Palestine they'll throw you off the building for being gay.
Right.
Literally, that you will die if someone finds out you're a homosexual in Palestine. Right? That's out of control. People just don't know. They're so insanely ignorant of what's happening. And so you say, how do we change it? We have to permeate the culture.
Yeah.
We have to become the cool kids.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know, I mean, look, people are so soft nowadays. Yeah. And in my experience, people are attracted to strength and not weakness.
Right.
So we got to be the antithesis to the soy boys.
Mm-hmm.
We got to be strong. We got to model strength. We have to model strength in our families. We have to model strength in our businesses and in our communities and our jobs, and not be afraid to speak what's on our mind. You know, I have to admit, when I first saw the caption, Maryland's most controversial conservative, and I saw my business logo on there, and for a second I thought, I wonder if that's going to be bad for business. But then immediately I said, I don't care. I don't care. I do not care, because what's happening in the country, in the culture, is more important than whether or not somebody will see that I am a controversial conservative and not patronize my business, or maybe there's picket signs outside my store tomorrow because I did this show and I said all this. I don't care. I have to plant my flag, and people have to get to that point where they're willing to plant their flag, and they're not gonna shake it. They're not gonna move out of fear for what the next person is gonna say or do. I refuse, and we need people to move like that.
And absolutely, and look how far we have come, because the points that you've said tonight, I say maybe even 5-10 years ago, they wouldn't have been controversial. These are things that have been the standard of morality and things like that for years, for decades. And now within the last 10 years or so, these things have become so crazy. I mean, who would have thought that it would be controversial and even discriminatory to say a man is a man and a woman is a woman? Now you can't even say that.
There was a song that was popular by Avril Lavigne, and it said, "He was a boy and she was a girl, could not make it any more obvious."
All right.
That was one of the biggest songs at one point in time. You couldn't play that song today. That song got canceled today.
It's madness. And then we as conservatives have to go around nervous, walking on eggshells, afraid. When I was a liberal, and I was liberal most of my life, and I was talking to you about this earlier, I didn't have conservatives. I used to flaunt my opinion about everything. I had a mission to get Fox News out of the hospitals. This is how much I used to tell everybody, and nobody batted an eye. You would get into a debate about something, and that was it. Now, as a conservative, I've gotten so much hate. I've lost so many friends, family members, not so much, not a lot, but, I've gotten heated discussions and things over silly stuff because we're conservative. If they're the ones who are intolerant, you have a business, and now you have to worry because of your views about, whether someone will patronize your business or not.
the problem is, especially when you get into these arguments or these debates with liberals, is they can't stand facts, right? So the reason why relationships get broken or people get into fights and people resort to name calling is simply because they can't argue their points with any sort of facts. They live in this fantasy world. So it's very difficult to have an educated conversation with a liberal where you're bringing up, valid points, facts, science, data, and you're trying to argue with them. Those people, they can't take it. It bruises them. It gets them. They're triggered. It's the microaggressions and you invading my safe space and all of this stuff. People just too soft. That's the problem. Yeah. I mean, I said it in another song. Your mama never beat you when it shows. You never got a whooping before. It's because people learning how to parent their kids from books.
Right.
These Pinterest parents. It's the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's these overeducated people, these experts in everything who don't know anything. But they're the experts that everyone is looking to now, instead of really going to, the matriarch or patriarch of your family, or things like that. People, like you mentioned, reading books and going to these so-called experts who are leading everyone down a path of destruction. And it's clearly seen. Yeah, it's clearly seen in the children, in the youth now.
It's like that quote that I'm sure you've heard a million times. It's strong men create easy times. Easy times create weak men. Weak men create hard times. Hard times create strong men. And it just keeps going. And we're in that point now where weak men have created hard times.
Absolutely.
And I'm hoping that through this, you'll see people becoming strengthened by it. You'll see more people like us who are just fed up, who are willing to do something about it, who are willing to speak up, who are willing to put their livelihoods and their name on the line to do something, to switch things up, to change the path. It's frustrating because it seems every day like we're losing, right? That things are going further and further in the wrong direction. But what can you do?
Right.
What can you do but fight back, push back, have the conversations, make people uncomfortable, invade people's safe spaces? You got to.
Yeah. And I think the key is conversations, like you mentioned, because people know you. People know me. And I would hope that, we have a certain amount of character and have built a certain amount of relationships with people, hopefully, where most will say, KJ, I've known KJ for a long time and now she's changing. Maybe there's something to this. And I have had those conversations with people.
Me too. Yeah, me too. Again, it's like, and the conversation always starts with, bro, you know me, bro. Like, I ain't no racist.
Right.
I ain't no homophobe. I don't hate on gay people. I just don't want you bombarding my children with this stuff. I don't want my 6-year-old niece to come home and, we try and figure out if the turtle is a boy or a girl, and she say it could be whatever it wants. We don't need all of this going on. You want to be gay? That's you. You do your thing, whatever. But this whole shoving it down the kids' throats, yeah. And again, if you know me and we've known each other for years, I don't understand how you could turn around and hate me for how I believe.
Right.
It is.
Well, we're at the end of our time, but I do. One thing I was going to mention is, as you mentioned, there was that phrase, you were the most controversial conservative. And clearly, that's not the case. But one thing would be sort of controversial is your stance on marijuana. So most conservatives, generally, I would say, are against the legalization of marijuana, but you support that. Can you talk about that just a little bit?
Sure. How do I start? I think the easiest thing to say is that there's solid science behind the medical benefit of marijuana. And if anybody wants to argue that there's no medical benefit to marijuana, you're a fool. Okay, and we can go back and we bring this to a spiritual level as well. God created that plant, put it in the ground for a reason. He also created the human body with a system inside of it called the endocannabinoid system. It's a series of several hundred receptors that go throughout the entirety of the human body that's designed specifically to interact with chemicals produced by the cannabis plant. And it cannot interact with any other chemicals but those produced by the cannabis plant. That system inside of the body is the balance beam for all the regulatory systems of the human body. So there's solid science for that. At the medical level, there's nobody who can argue the fact that there is a real medical and therapeutic benefit to cannabis use. I personally don't smoke weed. I used to smoke a bunch of weed. I don't smoke weed anymore because it makes me paranoid. But when we talk about the legalization of it, the reason why I believe cannabis should be legal is because I believe that it's more like a libertarian view for me, for the most part. It's like, if you can smoke a cigarette, if you can drink a beer, you should be able to smoke some weed. I don't see there being anything. People will say, "Oh, well, it makes you lazy." Yeah, but that's not the rule. Right, because there's many people who it sparks creativity and inspiration and work ethic. When I used to smoke weed, I would write my best music. You know, I would come up with things that I wouldn't have been able to come up with when I wasn't smoking. And in some regard, I miss it for because of that. So and being in the industry, I own 3 hemp dispensaries. So I'm on the hemp and CBD side more, but so I'm reading this comment. There's plenty of research against marijuana. God created psi, and Schweber taking it too. Okay, TD, I'm happy to discuss that point with you and to touch on that. Look, I know God created the poppy seed and we turned it into heroin, right? God created sex and we turned it into pornography and we turned it into all this other foul stuff. It's not to say that everything that God created is good. To be able to take advantage of it, and like you're talking about cyanide, I get what you're saying. I totally agree with you, but there is in moderation, there's nothing wrong, in my opinion, with somebody using cannabis. Would you say the same thing, TD, about alcohol? When you're
Let me ask you this.
When you go to your doctor and your doctor prescribes you with Xanax for your anxiety, how does that line up with your political or your spiritual beliefs? When you have back pain and your doctor prescribes you OxyContin, which is just regular legal heroin, how does that line up with your spiritual or your political beliefs? Because I think we're talking about apples and oranges here.
Now let me ask you something else, because I agree there are medical benefits to cannabis. 100%. I don't think anybody can dispute that.
The guy you had on last week tried to do that.
Well, then the thing, but in the same way, I don't believe that it is something necessary or beneficial for the majority of people. I mean, you have, and again, I have been around drugs all my life. I have, family members that are hooked on drugs. My mom, she passed away from cancer. She was a marijuana smoker. She was a cigarette smoker. And so I've been around it all my life. I don't know anyone that, no, let me just say this. It feels like to me the risk that I've seen over the majority of my life with people that smoke far outweigh the benefit. Especially in the Black community. I mean, these people they're overusing it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. So I could see if it was something where it was prescribed for people. You go to the doctor, they tell you what you need, and then they prescribe it based off of
people overuse McDonald's too. People overuse cigarettes, people overuse alcohol, people overuse television, right? People can overuse anything. And just because if you take too much vitamin C, that's a problem. If you take too much vitamin D, that's a problem. You cannot.
Well, these are the things you're saying: vitamin C, marijuana. I think the number was like 97% of crimes. So they're smoking marijuana. Now I know correlation doesn't necessarily lead to.
Yeah, I mean, but you would say the same thing about alcohol, right? I mean, alcohol is insanely worse. Number one, for your body, it's addictive. You can die from alcohol withdrawal. The reason why during the pandemic that the damn liquor stores had to remain open is because alcoholics could die if they didn't get their hands on their alcohol. Yet and still, nobody has that conversation, right? That's allowed. If you drive your car drunk, you can murder somebody because you're wasted and you can't see. You're not seeing, there's never been anybody really in the history of the world who's overdosed and died from marijuana use. Although that happens with the prescription drugs, that happens with alcohol, that happens with a multitude of different things. That happens if you eat too much damn McDonald's. Right. So here's what I know for an absolute fact is that everything in moderation is okay. And yeah, people do overuse marijuana. I was one of those people. I used to smoke weed all day, every day. It got to the point where I wasn't able to fall asleep without smoking weed. But once I realized that it was a problem, I nipped it in the bud, and I was able to stop because it wasn't physically addictive. I didn't go into weed withdrawals and have to curl up in the fetal position and sweat it out for 2 weeks like people do when they're going through opiate withdrawal, or have to go to a doctor and get prescribed Librium to stop me from dying when I'm going through alcohol withdrawal. It was like hey, I'm smoking a little bit too much weed. Maybe I should stop. And then I was able to just stop. Now, are there people that are going to get carried away with it still? Sure. Can we control everything everyone does? No. Should we try? No. Well, should people have the right and to make their own decisions? Yeah. Do I believe in legalizing all drugs? No, hell no. I don't believe in legalizing heroin. I mean, what they did in Oregon was out of control, legalizing just straight up legalized drugs. They're tripping. But I also do believe that, younger people, particularly in the teenagers that are smoking weed anyway, legal or not, they're smoking weed anyway. If it was legal and it wasn't this thing that they had to sneak around to do, the appeal of it is not there as much as it would have been. So I think the more that we normalize it, it'll become less appealing, and it'll become just this thing that the people who like it use it and the people who don't. I'm not an advocate for smoking weed all day, every day. I think that's a stupid way to spend your money. It's expensive. You can spend your money on a whole bunch of better stuff than just smoking weed all day long. I think that it does. It does inhibit people's ambition, and and it does in some ways make some people lazy. But those people had lazy bones anyway. Those were people that were going to be lazy anyway. It wasn't the weed that made them lazy. It was the weed that made being lazy more fun.
Right.
That's all it was. Right. You can't blame the substance. It's the person. I mean, we're conservatives, right? We're supposed to be believing in personal responsibility. Where is that in the weed conversation? Because if we're not having that conversation, what are we talking about?
Right. Well, I mean, but then there's the argument that, yes, we are supposed to believe in personal responsibility and individuality and things like that. But when the question is whether this smoking and intaking of marijuana causes other risks that will risk someone else's life.
Like what?
So that's the question. That's the question. Whether the legalization of marijuana will cause outrageous risk to other people's lives.
Here's what it'll do. There'll be less people in jail. Police will be able to focus on more important things. There'll be less interaction with the police from people who may never have had interaction with the police in the first place. There's a whole bunch of people who became career criminals because they went to prison for weed and came out with a PhD in cocaine and freaking murder, right? Mm-hmm. These are people who were just smoking some weed, who got caught 3 times in a state with a 3-strike rule and got a 10-year bid, right? You'll have streets that are cleaned up because there's not a whole bunch of people out there having to sneak around to buy the freaking weed. They can just go into the store and buy it like they do their alcohol. And if people who are alcoholics would be able to get their hands on other things that would make their life a whole lot less destructive. Instead of drinking all day, every day, maybe you smoke some weed. Tell you like this, you take 10 people, you put them in a room with a bottle of whiskey, you lock the door, they're going to be fist fighting, they're going to be hurting each other. You take 10 people, give them a blunt, put them in a room and lock the door, they're going to be talking about mapping out the cosmos and eating sandwiches. There's 2 different things we're talking about here. And I think that personal responsibility should be the crux of this entire conversation. If you're going to get carried away with it, that's on you. You get carried away with it. If it's illegal, you're still smoking too much damn weed, and it's not legal. If it becomes legal, it's not going to change anything. The potheads are already the potheads. It's not like we're going to see this whole new wave of potheads just because you can legally go and buy it when you're 21. No one starts smoking weed at 21. You know, they start smoking weed before that.
And just from your personal opinion, what is it about the weed? Because my husband, he's from the Caribbean, and the marijuana there is much different than it is here. It smells different. It's just different. What makes it? What is the difference? Because it's all coming from the same plant.
No, it is, but we've done a really freaking okay. So I will concede this. We have made weed in America way too strong. Like some of the stuff you can buy in a dispensary is not the way the plant was supposed to be consumed. I mean, you're talking about being able to buy concentrated THC at 90%. When we were growing up, you and I think we're around the same age probably, and when weed was around, when we were coming up, it had seeds in it. It was like brown, and it maybe had 10 to 13% THC. You'd smoke it, you get a headache, you'd eat something, you take a nap. Nowadays, we've genetically modified the plant in such a way that it's growing with insanely high amounts of THC, above 30%. Then we're making extracts from that plant that are extremely strong. The THC levels are extremely high. The edibles that we're making and some of these things that they've made weed extremely strong. There's no question about it. But on the flip side of that, that's what people need that are fighting stage 4 cancer. They need something called Rick Simpson oil that requires super high doses of THC as a tumor killer, right? These things actually work. They prolong people's lives that doctors have given up on. But so they need that. So if I were to make any sort of concession in this argument, I would say, let's let those types of things only be available to medical patients, and give everybody else the run of the mill weed, kind of like moonshine. You can't just legally go into the liquor store buy moonshine, right? Okay. So, because you don't need to be drinking that stuff. That's too much. But you can't buy Everclear, so who knows, man? You can go in there and buy 200 proof liquor, So I think weed is. But in Jamaica, in the Caribbean, they still smoking that dirt weed that we had when we were growing up. And you know what?
You don't see the issues there as much. I mean, they, even with drinking and stuff, you don't see the issues that we have here.
Well, we are a nation of excess, man. This is America. We do everything big. We do everything in excess, and that is a problem. And I agree with you there. But I think that this will be a massive social experiment that we won't know the repercussions of for quite some time. But I don't think that it's going to be this boogeyman that everybody thinks that it is. I think it's gonna create huge economic opportunity for a lot of people. It's going to bring in lots of revenue. It's going to be a whole new gold rush for people to be able to make money in, and for people to be able to invest in who don't want to directly participate in. There's going to be a lot of people that make a lot of money. There's going to be a lot of people whose lives are improved by it. And then there's going to be a lot of people who just decide to smoke too much weed, but those people would have smoked too much weed anyway. It's not going to make a difference, in my opinion. But I am a firm believer in the medical benefit of this plant. And some people don't like having to go to the doctor and get pilled up. Right. Some people don't want to go to the doctor at all and talk about their depression or talk about their anxiety or talk about their mood disorders or their stress. And that same person who might come home and drink a couple glasses of wine to take the edge off after a long day would just like to come home and smoke a joint and take a nap. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And there shouldn't be anything wrong with that. And that's what the plant was created for. We messed it up. We abused it like we do anything else that God creates. Mess it all up.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, we have gotten to the end of the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you so much for joining. I mean, I could talk to you for another whole hour. So you're just that interesting, but I really appreciate you coming on today. So again, guys, we are all over social media under Metro Conservative Media. Like, share, and leave a comment. And follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. Also, check us out on our webpage at www.metroconservativemedia.com. We'd love to get your feedback. Again, I hope to connect with you next Thursday at the same time. Wishing you warm days and starry nights. Good night.